everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Andrea. It's nice to have you guys here. Today I have a book chat video, my second one. I'm sitting here in front of my balcony window and I just realized one of my pots, my fake IKEA plants, has fallen off the table. Gonna have to go out and fix that in a little bit, probably once it gets dark and it's not 103 degrees outside. Anyway, today I wanted to go over all of the books that I read in the month of August. It is now September. We are a week into September and I'm about to finish my second book of this month. So before I get too distracted and can't remember the books I read in August, I wanted to sit down and film this video. I'm a little bit late, but that's okay. I think I read 7 in the month of July and I think I went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in August. So starting with the first one, all of them are on my Kindle this month, but there's nothing wrong with that. I like reading on my Kindle. The first one is called A Scone to Die For. This is the part of the Oxford Tea Room Mysteries. It is book 1. This is by H.Y. Hannah, who wrote 2 of the books from my July book chat video. She also writes a few different series. So I was reading some from the Bewitched by Chocolate series for July. So A Scone to Die For and the Oxford Tea Room Mysteries, they're really cute. There's no supernatural elements in this one. No one's a witch, no one's a vampire, it's just regular people. But it is set in and around Oxford. It starts off with a woman who has given up her high-flying career in Sydney, Australia to move back to Oxford and open up a tea shop that had been advertised for sale. So she kind of buys the shop, sells her flat in Australia, quits her job, and moves back to Oxford to completely change her career path. But along the way, mystery ensues. There's a mysterious death of someone found dead on the patio of her tea shop, and she kind of gets involved with helping local detectives solve the mystery. I really liked this one. I almost liked it better than the Bewitched by Chocolate series. I like the characters. I feel like the character development is a little bit stronger. Yeah, I thought they were really cute. I liked the mystery, murder mystery element of it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Midsummer Murders or Inspector Lewis or Inspector Morse, or also an element of Murder, She Wrote. She's just a normal person who runs this tea shop, but she's helping to solve the murder and getting involved in the investigation and getting into awkward moments through her unofficial investigations. There's a romance of sorts with the lead detective, who is an ex-boyfriend of hers from when they were both students at Oxford. So yeah, I just thought it was really cute. I like the references to different places around Oxford and just thought it was really good. So the next book I read was A Fire Sparkling. This is by Julian McLean. This was so good. Oh my gosh. If you've watched the last book chat video and then throughout this one, you'll kind of see I do have somewhat eclectic reading tastes. I am a sucker for cozy mysteries. I do like a bit of supernatural. I love a good romance, but I also love good historical fiction, and that is what this one is. So this one is set roughly present day and then 1939. I don't know how much to say without giving too much away. That's kind of the hazard with this, and this is not a book I would want to spoil for anyone. I think if you like World War II historical fiction that's led by female characters, I think you would love this. The basic premise is a woman comes home to visit her father and her grandmother. Her father lives with her grandmother. There's obviously relationship difficulties, family relationship difficulties, romantic relationship difficulties that the main character, Jillian, is dealing with. And so that's kind of going on in the background. But then she gets to her grandmother's house kind of needing to escape from her own life, and her father has found in an old jewelry box or trunk of sorts of his mother's, of the grandmother, a picture of his mother with a Nazi soldier in a Nazi uniform. And it kind of throws everyone up into the air a bit. Like, you know, what is this picture? The dates on it indicate that it was like around the time that Jillian's father, the son of the grandmother, would have been conceived based on his birth date. So it starts making them question, like, who is my mother really? Who is the grandmother really? And who is this man? And what does this mean for our family as we know it? And so then it starts going back and forth between the present day and the discussion, the conversation with the grandmother for her to kind of tell her story, and then going back to 1939 and her telling the story. And I wasn't like it was definitely a journey reading it. There were moments that I kind of thought I knew what was happening, and then moments where I totally didn't know what was happening. There was some things I guessed, there was a lot that I didn't. Some of the things that I guessed, I didn't really guess until literally like just a few pages before the reveal, which I really like that. I don't mind kind of guessing it, but I do get annoyed if I guess the ending from like page 5. If I guess where it's going like a few pages before it happens, that's different. Really liked this. It shows a lot of like what life was like living in London during the Blitz. It is set around the Blitz, but also women's involvement in the war, and like there's just a whole lot. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but it was really good. This was one that I started reading, and then by about the 3rd chapter, I knew I couldn't put this down, and I think I read most of it in one day. I just took a Saturday early in August and just laid in bed reading this off and on all day long, and it was glorious, and it was so worth it, and it's a really good book. So A Fire Sparkling, I highly, highly, highly recommend this. Oh, it was so good. Probably, looking at my list, yeah, favorite book I read in August. It was so good. I highly, highly recommend it. Then switching gears, next book I read was the 7th book in the Vampire Knitting Club series. This one is Lace and Lies. This was so good. I love the Vampire Knitting Club in general. I think I mentioned it in like my April or May monthly favorites. Towards the end of the semester, a friend had recommended this at the beginning of the spring semester, so I knew about them starting in January, but I didn't get around to reading them until around April. And then I tore through books 1 through 6 in like a month. They were perfect for that first like 6 weeks of my breakup, when I didn't really want to be reading a romance, but I didn't want to be reading anything super dark and depressing. I just needed a mental vacation from everything going on in my life, and the Vampire Knitting Club books were definitely that. And so I pre-ordered through Kindle book 7, which came out on July 31st, and I already am counting down the days to book 8 coming out. I think it's mid or end of October. I'm loving these books. So I've already kind of gone into these books in that monthly favorites, but just to recap really briefly for anyone who didn't watch that, the Vampire Knitting Club books are a young woman comes back to Oxford to visit her grandmother, who runs a knitting shop in the city center, and discovers that her grandmother has died. But then in the next chapter realizes her grandmother is not dead. Her grandmother has been turned into a vampire because someone tried to murder her. And so that's kind of the murder mystery or the mystery in a way of the first book. So within the first book, and within the first couple chapters of the first book, so I don't feel like this is really a spoiler, the series is called Vampire Knitting Club. So there's basically this nest of vampires that lives in the basement beneath the knitting shop. And so the main character, Lucy. Each new book is a different mystery that Lucy and her team of vampire amateur detectives tries to help Oxford police solve the mystery of. So in book 7, plot is that her shop has been chosen by a knitting company to host a reality TV show with a famous celebrity knitter and knitting designer, and yeah, one of the contestants gets murdered, and so then they have to solve that. So I have loved these. There is a romantic subplot that runs through each book, but again, like, we're up to book 7 and it's only just now starting to like not even really get off the ground. So it is slow, but it's okay. I like that it's slow. So yeah, the writing is really good. The character development is really good. They're just really fun and lighthearted. The mysteries are somewhat predictable, but you kind of like that about the books. So I recommend the series in general, and then book 7 was the one that I read last month, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Then the last 2 books that I read them out of order. I didn't realize that I was starting with book 2. There was nothing about it that said it was book 2. So I'm going to cover them in the order that I read them. So the first one I read was The Happiness Project by Pippa James. And then the second one, I'm just going to kind of go through them together because I don't want to give too much away. So then after The Happiness Project, I read I Will Survive, but I Will Survive is the first one. So if you're reading it, honestly, I didn't feel like it was that bad starting with the second one. It just felt like going back and reading a prequel instead of reading the first one and then the sequel, if that makes sense. But they're about 3 moms in a town somewhere in England. It kind of sounds like it's Midlands or up north a bit. They're all 3 very different women with different relationships and different backgrounds and different stories of how they became mothers. Kind of that, I guess, urge to find your friend group and become friends with the other moms at the school, trials and tribulations of being on the PTA, a lot of stuff that I don't really have any experience with, obviously, but it was still, I really liked how the characters were written. I feel like you understand them, you get where they're coming from, all of their actions make sense and are backed up by their character development. You're rooting for all of them. To me, they felt more about just the journey of being a woman, and they just happened to be moms. The books were about their lives and their journeys, and being moms were part of that. There's a lot going on in each book. Each character has their own journey that they go on, and I feel like with a lesser writer, it could have gotten to be too much and too confusing. I feel like the author does a really good job of balancing all of the characters, of developing each one and developing their individual plot lines, but also weaving them together. The last book that I read that had 3 primary characters that you were getting to know was The Cows, and by Dawn O'Porter. And if you watched last month's book chat, you'll remember that I didn't really like it. It felt like each character needed their own book to be properly developed. I didn't feel like that author had done the best job at bringing all of those characters together and making them feel like it worked within the plot. It just felt like she was trying to do too much in the span of one book. But in each book of these by Pippa James, in both I Will Survive and The Happiness Project, it felt like you really got to know each of the 3 main characters and their families and what each woman was going through. Definitely by the end of, if I'd read I Will Survive first, I would have been ready for the sequel. By the end of The Happiness Project, I still would love, I hope she does write a 3rd book. I'd love to know where these women's journeys go next. But I feel like between the 2 books, you really kind of feel like, not necessarily that you've come full circle with each of the characters, but each of the characters goes through a very clear journey. And yeah, I just thought they were really cute. They're really fun and easy, lighthearted. There's more serious stuff that each of the characters go through, but overall, the tone is pretty funny. I was laughing a lot, but there were also moments that were just nice. It wasn't too emotionally draining, but it wasn't all comedy, and it wasn't a laugh a minute. So just, I don't know, they felt like real life. I have friends who have children, and I've spoken with them a number of times about a lot of these topics, and it's something that, even though I don't have children of my own at this point, I do think about being a mom one day. And I don't know, I really liked how motherhood gets talked about, how parenting gets talked about in the book among the characters, and yeah, I just thought they were really good. So those are the 5 books that I read in the month of August. I definitely think A Fire Sparkling is the highlight of the month, and it's the one that I would recommend the strongest, but I really loved all of the books last month. There's not one that I wouldn't recommend. I just think not everyone goes for the cozy mystery genre or books like The Happiness Project or I Will Survive, so which are more like contemporary women's fiction. So if you like those genres, if you like cozy mysteries, if you like regular cozy mysteries, totally recommend A Scone to Die For. We'll be reading book 2 at some point. If you like cozy mysteries with a bit of supernatural, definitely recommend Vampire Knitting Club. If you like contemporary women's fiction with a little bit of like chick lit romance, I think The Happiness Project and I Will Survive are fantastic. But whether you like historical fiction or not, like no matter what genre is your preferred, like I highly, highly, highly recommend A Fire Sparkling, because it's just got a little bit of everything, and I definitely cried, but in a good way, and it was just so good. So definitely recommend that one. I'd love to know what books you read in the month of August, what books you are reading now. So give me your book recommendations in the comments below, as well as letting me know what books you've been reading lately and loving. Say hi in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and hear how you're doing. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. Subscribe if you are not subscribed, and I would really appreciate that. And I will see you all soon in the next video. Thank you very much for watching this one. Bye-bye.